Good morning, friend. Welcome back to the Morning Minute Meditation. Hope you have a great week in this upcoming week. Pray the Lord's richest blessings down upon your life. If you happen to be in the Boone, North Carolina area, I will be preaching at the Antioch Baptist Church, where Pastor Daniel Lawrence is the pastor. They're in Sugar Grove, North Carolina, 7 p.m. nightly, Monday to Friday. Come by and be with us. We'll have a great time together. Let's talk about the subject of worship today. Jesus, when he was dealing with the woman at the well in John chapter number 4, was talking about himself and who he was as God. Here's what he said in John 4:23. He said, "But the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipers, real genuine worshipers, they will worship the Father in spirit and in truth." Then he uses this addendum on that verse when he says this: the Father is seeking such to worship him. In other words, he is seeking such whose spirit is right, and he's seeking such whose truth is right. The next verse is more familiar. He said, God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. In other words, if truth isn't there, there is no worship. And if the spirit is not right, there is no worship. There's a lot of commotion in churches today of various denominations, sorts, and kinds, whether tongues are involved or not. There are many emotionally driven churches who talk about the worship that they have. Only it's not worship. At the very best, it's praise, adoration to God for the things that he has done. Nothing wrong with praise unto the Lord. It is a biblical doctrine. But praise and worship are two completely different things. Worship is more intimate, and it is done more often in private than it is done in public. There are many churches who have renamed themselves worship centers. Only the truth is very little worship goes on in the center. Maybe a lot of praise, maybe a lot of adulation toward God, but very little intimate worship goes on in regard to the Lord. In Genesis 22 verse 5, the very first time that worship is mentioned in the Bible, Abraham is said to go up on the mountain and offer his son Isaac upon an altar. He said, we are going there to worship, the lad and I. In other words, worship costs you something. It's sacrificial. That same precedent is set in the book of Matthew, chapter number 2. The first time worship is mentioned in the New Testament with the Magi or wise men as they come to find Jesus. And as they worship him, they lay down at his feet gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. In other words, worship is something that is an investment in God. Worship is something that costs us along the way. And worship is very precious. Are you a worshiper, or are you just a praiser of God? This is a legitimate question that needs to be asked. In the book of Psalms, in chapter number 5, verse 7, the psalmist said, "But as for me, I will come into thy house," a good place to do this, "into thy house in the multitude of thy mercy, and in thy fear will I worship toward thy holy temple." Again, the psalmist said in Psalm 29, verse 2, "Give unto the Lord the glory due unto his name." And then he said, "Worship the Lord," he said, "in the beauty of holiness." Verse number 6 of Psalm 95, "O come, let us worship and bow down our hearts." He said, "Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker." Are you a worshiper? I would say that very few of us genuinely know what it is to worship. There was a young man who had gone to church on a Sunday and spent a good day there. At the end of the day, as he knelt beside of his bed to pray and he folded his little hands, his mother overheard him say, "Dear God, we had such a great time in church today. Oh, how I wish you were there." Isn't that the truth? A lot of times we go to the house of God, our minds subdivided on the different categories of our life and what's going on, and we spend more time planning our week on a Sunday morning service than we do worshiping the King. And in turn, the Lord is not there for us to worship because of a subdivided heart. It was Henry Ward Beecher, the great orator, who was supposedly going to be in a very popular church in a particular town. But what the congregation didn't know was it was not Henry Ward Beecher, it was Beecher's brother. Beecher's brother came to the church, and when Beecher's brother got up in this full packed house and he got up to give his oration before the crowd, when many of the people saw that it was not Henry Ward Beecher, they began to rise to their feet and walk out in the middle of the service. The frustrated pastor jumped to his feet and rushed to the podium, and this is what he said. He said, "All who have come here today to worship Henry Ward Beecher may now withdraw themselves from the church. But those of you who came here today to worship the Lord may remain in your seat." Let me ask you a question. Whom and what are you worshiping today? You will worship something. I'm just asking you who and what. Consider these things and have a great, great day.